Hi everybody, I'm Giddy. Welcome to my garden and happy Thanksgiving. Come along with me while I share some of my favorite Thanksgiving recipes that have been passed down from generation to generation. Okay, so in order to make the dressing for Thanksgiving, you have to start off by making the cornbread first. And I use the Texas style yellow cornbread mix made by Morrison's. I don't know if that's just a Texas cornbread, but as long as you use a cornbread that's not sweet, it should turn out fine. So all you need to do is, depending on what cornbread mix you use, I use 2 packages. You want to make sure that you just follow the directions on the back of the cornbread mix. For instance, this one calls for 2/3 cup of milk and 1 egg. All right, keep in mind that because I'm using 2 bags of mix, even though it only calls for 2/3 cup milk, because I'm using 2 packages, I do have to double up on the milk. So I've just taken a 1/3 measuring cup and did it twice per package. Okay, so you just kind of break the eggs and then you just whisk. Kind of mix it gently. And then you'll pour it in a greased pan. All right, so I didn't bore you by mixing up the cornbread mix. I just did it off the camera. This is what it should look like when it's done. Then you want to get a spatula so you can get it and make sure you get all the bits out of the bowl. So we'll just scrape the bowl and pour the cornbread mix in. Make sure you get all the spots. All right, so it's in. I had to kind of shake it to get it smoothed out, and we are good to go in the oven, and I'll meet you back when it's cooked. All right, so we start off with a stick of butter. Now we're not Paula Deening it over here, we're making a lot of cornbread. So keep that in mind. You'll have to base your butter amount on how much stuff you're putting in your cornbread. All right, you can see I still have quite a lot of butter compared to the celery, so I'm going to go ahead and finish cutting up the rest of the stalk of celery. So it'll probably end up being about 2 cups of celery. The next thing I've chopped up fairly fine is a bunch of green onions. You want to make sure you cut the tips off that have the roots. You want to make sure you cut the tips off that are gross and kind of peel it, and make sure you really wash in between those layers. Cut it up, and then we're going to put it in with the celery and the butter. Alright, so I know some people just take and like chop up all the parsley. I don't like to do that. I like to literally take it and pop the leaves off. I think it just makes it taste better. I can't stand when I bite into something and there's like a big stem on it. Whether it's parsley, spinach, I don't like the stems. So that's what I do. Alright, so after you have your celery off of the stems, you want to take it and you want to bunch it up into your fist, as small as you can possibly get it. I personally like the curly parsley, but all they had was flat parsley, so we're going to make this work. Anyway, then you take your knife and you very slowly start cutting into it with it bunched up in your fist. Okay, then you can turn it and bunch it up again. You can always take it, I guess, and put it in a cup with some scissors and go after it, but this works just fine. Turn it, bunch it again. Alright, then we're going to go ahead and take this and we're going to stick it in the pot. with everything else. All right, so we've got this turned on, and the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add a can of the cream of chicken soup into this. And then there's going to be some residual stuff left over. I'm taking chicken broth, and I found this low sodium chicken broth. Anywhere that I can cut back on sodium, I try to do it, because we don't eat like this anymore. We only eat like fresh vegetables and beans and a little bit of lean meat. We don't eat canned vegetables. So this is like really salty to us in my family, because we don't usually eat like this. But for Thanksgiving, we stick with the traditions, and we do it the way we were taught to do it. Anyway, so you give this a stir. It'll start to boil. I'll show you what it looks like when it's all mixed together in a little bit. All right, I know this is gonna sound really strange, but in the dressing, it's very savory. There's nothing sweet about it. But we do add the golden raisins. Now keep in mind, animals can have onions. There's onions in the dressing. Animals can't have raisins. There are raisins in the dressing. So I'm not saying you feed your animal, but if you do, don't feed them the dressing, because there are things in here that could hurt them. All right, so what I do is I go through the raisins. I want to keep the golden ones, but if there's like any really small dark ones, I want to go ahead and take those out. They're going to be hard, and we don't want any hard raisins in our dressing. So you just want the golden, soft, sweet ones, nothing hard and crunchy. All right, so you're going to take, those don't look good. You're going to take about a handful or so, and go ahead and mix it into the pot with the other ingredients. All right, even though I'm cooking the stuff that's going to go into the cornbread to make the dressing, the timer went off, so I went ahead and pulled out the cornbread, and you want to give it a good toss. Because you're not making just one serving, you're adding more packages. It's thicker, and you have to make sure it gets cooked. When I went through it, you could still see it's kind of gummy, so that tells me it's not cooked all the way. Sometimes I've flipped it open and it's still totally raw inside. So I'm going to put this back in the oven for a few more minutes just to make sure that it's dry and that it's cooked thoroughly. All right, so I've taken the dressing out of the oven, and even though it has these brown bits, that's totally okay, because you want to get in here, you're going to crumble it up. You want to wait for it to cool off before you do this, so you don't burn yourself. But really get in there, you want to crumble it all up. I know a lot of people use bread crumbs, I don't know, stuffing mix. I don't use that. It's just strictly cornbread, and you want to crumble it up and make sure you get the bottom, crumble that up. All right, now the next step is when the stuff on the stove is finished cooking, you're going to pour it in there, and I'll show you that in a minute. All right, so once this has cooked and the stuff is soft, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to scoop it into the cornbread mix. I use a ladle just simply because sometimes I make it in different pans, and I want to make sure that each pan gets the right amount of vegetables. All right, so you have the vegetables that you were cooking in the big pot. You have it in here. You want to go ahead and mix it all in. Now, even though we had added a whole box of the chicken broth, it still is a little dry, and so what I want to go ahead and do is open up another box of chicken broth and pour that in here. Now the chicken broth won't go to waste because once you're cooking it, when the top gets dry and kind of crusty, you want to go ahead and break it apart again and stir it around, add more chicken broth, and let it cook some more. All right, so I have a box of chicken broth, and I'm literally just pouring it on the top. And I'm going to try to stir that again a little bit. That is much better. You don't want it totally mush, but you don't want it dry either, because as it cooks, it is going to dry out a little bit, and you want those ingredients to really mesh in there and not be too dry. I don't like my dressing too dry, and I don't like it too runny and mushy. Gotta have a happy balance. All right, so this is ready to go in the oven. Okay, so I've taken the dressing out of the oven, and it's got, you know, you can see it's like got a little bit of crusties around the edges, and that's okay. Now you want to take it and you want to fold it, stir it all onto each other. Get all those edges, put them in the middle. Then you want to smush it, smooth it back out. You can add a little bit more broth to the top. You don't want it to dry out. You don't want it to be a mushy mess, but you don't want it to dry out either. So we will take just some leftover broth that we had, put that on top. Now it's going to go back in the oven for about 15-20 minutes. Double check it. When you have more crusties around the edges, it's done and ready to eat. All right, so here's the dressing. I've just pulled it out of the oven, and you can see that it's a nice golden color. You've got some crunchies on the side, and it's ready to go. So this was our Thanksgiving spread. We had the pumpkin pie, rolls, candied cranberries that my daughter made. This was the dressing that you just saw. My dad made the turkey. We've got gravy, cranberry sauce, black olives, and the green bean casserole. This is our spread. It was real easy this year. Just make your own. We even used paper plates. We had a lot of places to go, and we did not want to waste time cleaning. So here's the final result.